Hello and welcome to Adapter Parish episode 39, Godzilla. Before we get started, let's talk about our next episode. So, at Adapter Parish, we pride ourselves on having our fingers right on the pulse, and I think our next episode proves that. Literally weeks after Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper killed it at the Oscars, and everyone got completely sick of hearing Shallow literally everywhere, you'll be able to hear our thoughts on the many versions of A Star is Born. So we watched the 1937 version, the 1954 version, the 1976 version, and the newest version from just last year. That'll be episode 40, available on Tuesday, April 9th. From the corrections department, if you listened to our Brokeback Mountain episode, you would have heard that Ariel and I are not experts on kitchen tools and implements, so we didn't know that the thing you use to roll pasta is called a pasta press. So thank you to Lauren for letting us know about that. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adapterparishcast@gmail.com or tweet at us using the AdaptCast hashtag. You can find all of the show notes from this and other episodes at adapterparishcast.com. And with that, on with the show, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Hello and welcome to Adapter Parish, a podcast about adaptation. My name is Jeremy Latour.
And I'm Ariel Lipshaw.
This is a big one.
I'm excited.
We're talking about big boy today. A big beefy boy is coming to eat us all and melt our faces. He's Godzilla.
Yeah.
We're doing Godzilla.
He's coming out of the deep.
Now this was one you wanted to do this one because of how much you love Godzilla, right?
This is incorrect.
Oh, okay.
You wanted to do it because of how much you love Godzilla.
As
is my recollection.
Okay, so I feel like maybe I should just kind of temper expectations really quickly because Godzilla is one of those things where I was saying this to you today, there is no shortage of analyses of all of the 30 some odd Godzilla movies.
Yeah, and you, I think, watched some YouTube videos that made you very angry.
Well, I might come to him.
Yeah.
But bottom line,
yes,
I am a very casual Godzilla lover.
That's fair.
I had never actually seen the original movie all the way through until we did this.
Yes.
But let's talk about what we're going to be discussing today.
Yes.
So we wanted to do Godzilla. And we had to decide very early on, what are we going to talk about and what are we not going to talk about?
Because we started out, we were going to watch 3 Godzilla movies, and we ended up watching 5.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
4.5.
No, it was 5.
Okay. So we watched the original 1954 Gojira, the Japanese film that these all came from.
Yes.
Then we watched the 1956 Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to spoil. We'll talk about it in a few minutes.
Yes.
Then we watched the 1998 Roland Emmerich, Matthew Broderick Godzilla.
Can I spoil something about that one?
Sure.
What a piece of shit that movie was.
Yeah, it's the only one. I'm so conflicted about it because I think it's the definition of unsuccessful, but also it's I saw it in the theater when I was 15 and was really excited about it and kind of loved it for a long time, but it's not good.
It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Let's move on.
All right, we also watched the 2014 Godzilla directed by Gareth Edwards that came out just a few years ago.
Which we did see live in the theater.
Well, this is great. We're now completing our double feature.
That's right.
We went to go see The Fault in Our Stars and Godzilla one day.
It was raining one day. Oh, no, it was my birthday.
Was it?
Yeah.
Happy birthday, sweetie.
Yeah, you made me watch Godzilla, and then we watched The Fault in Our Stars, which was ultimately a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, so when we left,
it was not a great double feature.
We agreed that Godzilla was better.
As a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then we also watched the 2016 movie Shin Godzilla, which was, so Toho Studios owns Godzilla.
Right.
This was their big kind of reboot of Godzilla.
So what we did was we watched 1 Japanese movie, 3 American movies, and then we bookended it with another Japanese movie.
Yes.
It was fascinating watching these chronologically.
Well, so this was one of those things we talked about is kind of how we're going to talk about all of these.
Yeah.
We can't really get caught up in how did this character get interpreted into this and how did this actor play it? Because almost none of the same characters appear in any of these movies.
Except for one.
Yes, the great big beefy boy.
Or lady.
Or lady. Yes, that's true. None of them appear.
Yeah.
Because the only thing these movies all have in common are Godzilla itself.
Yes.
So, how are we going to talk about them? Well, there's really two things that came up as we were watching that we kept coming back to: metaphor and tone.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about this a little bit? For those that say, I thought it was a monster movie, you're telling me it's more? Was it like a costume drama?
Yes, it was a costume drama.
Was it a slapstick parody?
Well,
you got Godzilla slipping on giant banana peels?
okay. This movie came out in 1954.
Can I read the back of the box?
Oh, God, yeah.
So I don't have a physical box, but I do have the IMDb synopsis of this.
Go ahead.
Strap in. It's going to take a minute.
Okay.
American nuclear weapons testing results in the creation of a seemingly unstoppable dinosaur-like beast.
Cool.
Would you like to proceed?
Yes. Only 9 years before, Japan had suffered a great tragedy, which was the bombing of the two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Mm-hmm.
So I have done a little bit of research on this, basically the number of people who died. So on August 6, 1945, this was the very end of World War II, the Americans bombed the city of Hiroshima with the agreement of Great Britain.
Yes.
Resulting in over 70,000 fatalities, mostly civilians. And then 3 days later, on August 9th, 1945, they bombed the town of Nagasaki, which resulted in something like 39,000 fatalities, also mostly civilians. There were some people that were in both. Like, they evacuated Hiroshima to Nagasaki, and then Nagasaki was bombed.
Yeah.
The number that I found on Wikipedia blew my mind because it gave a range of 129,000 to 226,000 killed. That is a range of over 100,000. So, or a little under 100,000. I do math good. So I don't know what constitutes that range of 100,000 people that they don't know if they were killed or not. Like, that seems like a lot. But it is fascinating that this movie was created in the wake of this, essentially this generational trauma that occurred. Like, when you think about like the great foreign, attack of our generation, which was 9/11, right? How many people were killed in that? Like, maybe 3,000?
It's like 3,500.
Yeah, which is a lot. Like, that's not to say that's not a lot of people or that their lives weren't precious, but like, this was hundreds of thousands of people, civilians in their homes. Like, I think the scope of that is hard to wrap your mind around.
Yeah, and the other part of it too, just to jump in for a second, is they weren't really allowed to talk about it either because they
lost the war.
They lost the war, and we were there.
Yeah.
And there was a huge amount of censorship that was going on around being able to create, for example, art that talked about what happened.
Yeah.
And because we didn't want them doing that at the time.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, right, like, what do? You're sort of attracted and you almost fetishize the thing that scares you the most. And what was the trauma that these people were maybe kind of working out, which was the fear of their city being destroyed and all of the buildings falling down and everyone being killed. This is also like a country that sits on like numerous fault lines on tiny islands. Like, they're not strangers to like something scary coming out of the sea and disrupting the literal foundation of their homes and buildings, right? So it is just really interesting to me that like this thing that we see over and over and over again is a giant scary monster destroying an entire city that no one is able to stop or do anything about. We see, like, just over and over and over again, these images of people fleeing this monster. You can really see that come through in this original 1954 Godzilla.
Yeah,
it's just fascinating.
There's just the one scene in particular that sticks with me as I laughed, which is totally inappropriate given how dark this scene is.
Yeah.
But so towards the end of the movie, Godzilla is having his big rampage. And there's this mother in a doorway with her 3 kids, and she's clutching them to her. And how does she comfort them?
She's saying, "Don't cry, don't be scared. We'll be with Daddy soon."
It's super fucking dark.
Yeah.
And really affecting.
The other scene that struck me was there is a scene of just people in Tokyo on the subway or the elevated train, like going about their business. And there's this very pretty, very cosmopolitan woman that's like holding onto the strap and talking to her companion. And she says to him, like, "I'm not scared of anything. I survived Hiroshima. I was there. And here I am. And I'm not going to worry too much about it. And then there's another scene, and she's just kind of carefree. And then there's another scene of her later where you see her and Godzilla's attacking, and she's
like on a boat.
Yeah, she's on a boat. But it's just interesting, like seeing these shots of people going about their daily lives in the shadow of this like terrible thing that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, hang on. So let's back up for a second.
Okay, yeah, back up the bus. We got ahead of ourselves.
Let's talk about this movie.
Okay.
So I just want to give a couple quick little details about who created this. It's produced by Tomoyuki Tanaka. And I am just going to take a moment to prepare our listeners for the fact that we are going to say many Japanese names in this episode.
Yes.
And I am hoping we are pronouncing all of them as close to correct as we can.
Yes, including one version of this movie that we watched that had over 300 named characters.
Yes. So
we're very sorry.
I just want to get that out of the way. So he produced like most of the Godzilla movies for years. This was kind of his big thing. And it was directed by Ishiro Honda. Who also ended up directing many Godzilla movies over the years. In a little bit, we'll talk about like all those movies because they're not directly what we're talking about today. Let's remove Godzilla from the equation for a second.
Okay.
All of these movies are about people.
Yes.
They're about different people every time, but they are about people.
Yes.
I would say that this movie has, I'm going to say 4 main characters.
Okay.
I would say up at the top, we have Takashi Shimura as Dr. Kyohei Yamane.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Yamane. Which is great. I like Takashi Shimura. He's in Seven Samurai. He's very, very good.
Yes.
He's the voice of reason.
He's the voice of reason.
Mm-hmm.
He is the one that is saying we should study this creature, not just reflexively kill it.
Right. And so why was he brought in?
Oh, because he's a paleontologist.
Mm-hmm.
So he's an expert in actual dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And so he was brought in to consult.
Right. On the fact that many boats have been lost.
Yes, off Odo Island.
Right.
Near Odo Island.
And people have spotted what they call a dinosaur.
Yes.
And so they bring him in. He also has a family.
Yes.
He's got his daughter, Emiko Yamane, who's played by Momoko Kochi.
Yes.
She's very major in this movie.
Of all 5 movies we watched, she has the most agency of any female character. Except for maybe one in the 2016 version, but we'll come to that.
You don't think 98 had female agency?
I do not.
You don't think so?
No.
This is a big lady in it.
I'm going to talk about that. Female human.
Right. Now, there's also, there's a bit of a love triangle.
Yes. There is a classic love triangle,
Yeah. Well,
in fact.
one thing I really respect about it is that it isn't this kind of classic love triangle. It's not, oh, there's these 2 guys and they're vying for her affections. There's her ex and her current boyfriend.
Right.
And her ex isn't getting back together with her.
Never, ever, ever getting back together.
Like, he's not trying to.
No, he does not care.
He's got bigger stuff going on.
Yes.
But let's just say her current boyfriend is Hideto Ogata, who's a Marine, and he's played by Akira Takarada. I feel like the movie sets him up as the hero.
Yes.
Like, you meet him first, and he's very handsome.
He's very handsome.
But he's kind of a minor character in this.
Yeah, he doesn't do that much.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, you definitely so he came on screen and I was like, there's our hero. He's the tallest one and he's very handsome. And you were like, well, this is cinema in the Japanese tradition. Like, they may not have the same tropes as we have, in American cinema that you're used to. And it totally turned out he was the dreamy love interest that I assumed he was.
I want to be clear. I feel like you're mischaracterizing what I said.
Okay.
I didn't say maybe they don't have the same tropes. I said maybe this one doesn't adhere to the same tropes.
Fair enough.
I want to be presented correctly.
Fair enough.
But we have a 4th big character.
Yes.
And he is a very sad boy.
Yeah.
He's very, very sad.
Yes.
And this is Dr. Daisuke Serizawa.
Yes.
As played by Akihiko Hirata.
Got it.
Okay. Dr. Serizawa is he's got one eye and lots of problems.
He's very sad. He has one eye, and he has invented...
Also 0 girlfriends.
He thinks he does, and then his girlfriend goes over to tell him that she would like to break up with him to see the other boy.
I thought they'd already broken up.
No. She goes over to his house to tell him about her new boyfriend and why they can't be together. And that's when he shows her the oxygen destroyer. And and she is so freaked out. And then she goes back to her new boyfriend and says, I didn't tell him.
We're like agreeing about 90% of this.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I think they were already broken up. but he didn't know she was seeing someone.
I'm not clear that that's true.
He's got a lot of problems and he could not focus on her.
Okay, fine. Well, anyway, one of his problems is his oxygen destroyer.
I thought you were going to say his one eye.
The one eye doesn't really present I mean, I don't think there was any moment where his one eye was a problem for him.
No, I think one of the things that it's doing is they're really playing on the fact that I think they're setting him up as the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like, I think he adheres to a lot of tropes of the villain, but he ends up being the hero. Spoiler alert, like, we're going to ruin all of these movies.
Yeah.
He ends up being the hero of the story.
Yes.
Because they do, in fact, kill Godzilla.
Yeah. For a while, just sidebar, we thought that maybe this actor actually did just have one eye because all the pictures we found of him, he had the eye patch on. And then we realized that all of those pictures were from this movie.
Yeah. He does, in fact, have two eyes.
Yes.
So those are our characters. Basic plot, Godzilla's attacking all these boats, and then he's attacking the mainland, and then he goes away. And then he attacks the mainland again, and he attacks Tokyo.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then they go after him.
Yeah.
We go after him with Dr. Serizawa's oxygen destroyer,
Yeah.
his underwater bomb.
Yes.
And we basically kill Godzilla.
We skeletonize him.
Right. That's the plot of it.
Yes.
But like I said at the beginning, we're going to talk about two things: tone and metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine this movie existing separated from that internal metaphor of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
At least I couldn't, and then we saw it, but that's for a minute from now.
Yes.
It's there the entire time. There's so many supporting characters, and the way they are all reacting to Godzilla and to each other and to the tragedy around them and the need to survive is so clearly from the tragedy that everyone has experienced.
Yeah.
And I think it like sets the stage for what Godzilla is to many people, because eventually the metaphor has nothing to do with Godzilla.
Right.
Or let me rephrase that. Godzilla movies have nothing to do with that metaphor.
Sure.
It like pops up through the decades, but there comes a point when Godzilla is just a big monster hitting other big monsters.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were explicitly referenced in this movie. Like they were discussed as things that had happened in the universe of this movie. I'm not sure they are mentioned in any of the American movies. They're definitely mentioned in the more modern Japanese movie.
So that's the metaphor.
Yeah.
What about the tone? What'd you think? Did you like this movie?
I thought this movie was fascinating. This was, I would say, my favorite of all of them. And I mean, for a couple of reasons. One, I thought, like, as you say, like the tone was very consistent. I mean, there were things that we laughed about just in terms of things they did not really have the technology to do well.
It's very inventive.
But they did a great job in terms of like what was, clearly done with sort of miniatures and what was done, in different ways. Like this was clearly people that were really trying hard to make a good movie. Like this it's not schlocky. Like it's not what you think when you think of like monster movies from the 60s, like really like lurid monster movies. This is like predates that.
Yeah, I think this was definitely inspired by like older schlocky monster movies.
Yeah.
Like this was directly inspired by King Kong, the original King Kong.
Right. From the 30s.
Right. They wanted to do that. In fact, they were going to do Godzilla like stop motion, the way King Kong was. And then they were like, oh, well, that's going to be too expensive. Let's put a guy in a suit.
Yeah.
And that began like the grand tradition of man in suit kaiju movies.
Sure.
But getting back to the tone for a second.
Yeah.
I feel like the movie really created a mold in terms of what the ideal tone for a Godzilla movie is, which is very serious and exciting with levity in it, but not jokey.
No.
There are no characters that are comic relief, and the characters are all written in a way where they're all very present and experiencing the destruction as real destruction. Like there's no ironic detachment.
Yeah.
This is happening.
Right.
This is real for them. And I think that comes up in a lot of good monster movies. And it's one of those things that I feel like is missing in bad ones.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah. But that's the original Godzilla. Like I said, I hadn't seen this movie before. I'd seen bits and pieces of it. It's really, really good.
I'd recommend anyone watch it, especially if you have some kind of like preconceived idea of what it is, because it may not be what you think.
Yeah. Now, there may be people out there who are listening that say, well...
What about the American?
Yeah, what about Raymond Burr?
Yeah.
I don't understand how you can talk about Godzilla without talking about Raymond Burr, because he's the main character. How could you do that? Like, I saw this movie when I was a kid, and I've seen it. I know what you're talking about. I know Dr. Serizawa and Dr. Yamane and Emiko, but what about Steve Martin? What about your man Steve Martin?
And to them we say, you have watched the wrong version.
Okay, so 2 years after this movie came out, it was appropriated. I say appropriated, it was licensed. Like an American studio got it.
I don't know. I think appropriated is a pretty good word for it.
So this is weird.
Yeah.
So 2 years later, the movie was released in the United States, Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Yeah.
So we're right up. Immediately, we have to talk about a couple of different things because the monster's name is not Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Gojira.
Gojira. I've struggled with this for a really long time. I've struggled with calling the monster Godzilla.
Yeah.
Because it's so clearly a really kind of racist interpretation of a Japanese person saying the name Gojira.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like, I guess I don't even like, I could not understand. Like, because I've always heard Godzilla, Godzilla, Godzilla. And I guess I just thought like Gojira was like an alternate name, maybe. I guess I didn't understand what Gojira was. But like, I don't understand why we had to sort of other than what you say, which is people are racist, especially with sort of non-European languages.
I mean, I think it was someone who was sitting there thinking, well, when Japanese people use an R sound, it means they're trying to say L.
That's so upsetting.
It is. No, it's super upsetting, and I struggle with it.
I literally don't know why we don't just say Gojira. Like, why has it come down to us as Godzilla, not Gojira? That's so strange to me.
I think there's this other thing, too, of the fact that now God is in the name.
Yeah.
And that has stuff in English that comes along with it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, basically, we're here.
Yeah, here we are.
Here we are.
It has been Godzilla. We cannot change this.
Right. So this movie, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, comes out.
Yes.
It is Gojira. It is the original Godzilla.
Yeah.
About half an hour of it or 40 minutes of it.
Yeah.
And then what they've done, what director Terry Morse did, I like how the official directors of this are Ishiro Honda and Terry Morse.
Oh my God.
What they thought was, well, American audiences are not going to get this or give a shit for two reasons. One, Americans don't want to feel bad about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's why would we do that to people?
Yeah.
Let's not.
We won.
Yeah, we won. They attacked us first. They deserved it. Like this is the thinking of a.
Yes, this is not our personal thinking.
No, this is not our personal thinking. We believe this is a very complicated situation that we are generations removed from.
And in no position to comment on.
Right. And then the second part is, well, how could they possibly get invested with any of the characters? None of them are white.
And they all speak Japanese.
That's a big problem as well. So what they decided to do is they decided to change this from a movie about a bunch of Japanese people who live in Japan and have jobs and are smart and relationships and solve things and wants and needs, and replace most of their stories with the story of a reporter named Steve Martin who has traveled to Japan and has got caught up in all of this.
Yes, that is accurate. That is what they did.
Yep. Played by kind of a big beefy boy himself,
Oh,
Raymond Burr.
don't body shame people.
He's so big. He's just a big guy. It's noticeable.
Okay.
It's noticeable because I would say 90% of the shots he's in are just him in a crowd of Japanese people towering over them, being shocked at what's happening in front of him.
Yeah.
That's all that's
Just
happening.
his big head just floating in this crowd.
Right.
Yeah.
There's like nothing to talk about in terms of his story
No,
beyond what I just
it's
said.
Nothing. It is nothing.
Like-
and like, there's an implication that he's the one who's having the relationship with Emiko. And like,
You
he
said I
knows
disagree
her
with that
somehow.
completely.
Like, he suddenly knows her, but we never saw them meet. Like, it's very weird.
He knows her because he's friends with Dr. Serizawa.
Yeah, but we don't see that.
Yeah, we do when he's on the phone with fake Dr. Serizawa. So what they did,
Oh my God.
the whole movie is, I find it delightful. Like on one level, it's really delightful and really inventive. And on another level, it is useless and stupid and they never should have done it.
Yeah.
But basically, the movie that we see, Godzilla King of the Monsters, is a mix of footage from the original movie,
Yeah.
all dubbed,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah.
Then you have either entirely new scenes that have been shot with Raymond Burr and American actors.
Yeah.
And then you have a whole mix where these scenes have been put together.
Yeah.
Where, a scene is happening that it's amazing. He was just there for everything.
Yeah. He's got like a buddy, like an interpreter that he's like walking around with who's clearly a Japanese American actor from Southern California by his accent, who is just like showing him around and explaining to him what's going on.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
It's so weird. And he's present everywhere.
Yeah.
So every big scene of the original movie happens, but what you find out in this one is like, oh no, this dude was there the whole time.
Yes.
And he's always off on the side. He always has a couple of people around him to show that he's in the scene.
Right.
And then the reverse shot is always the original scene from the movie.
Or just the back of someone's head.
Well, then there's conversations.
Right.
Then sometimes he actually talks to the actual main characters. So, like, he has a whole scene with Dr. Yamane, and you never see the front of Dr. Yamane's head at all.
Because it's the back of someone's head who is not Dr. Yamane.
Do you remember the very first shot, like, that you see of this happening in the movie? There's a whole thing after Godzilla is attacked. In the original, there's a really good scene where they're in a makeshift hospital, and Emiko is going around and kind of caring for people and little kids, and it's very harrowing and very sad. And in this version, Steve is the one who's like being cared for.
Yes.
And they use a shot of her going to like a child.
Yeah.
But then it cuts and it's a shot of him with another actress in front of him that he's talking to.
Like the back of her head.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just so shocking to have just watched the original like the day before. It's ballsy.
Yeah.
It's really, really ballsy.
Yeah.
But my favorite is it's set up that he knows Dr. Serizawa and he's there to see him, but he can't get in contact with him. And so then he calls him on the phone and we cut to Dr. Serizawa's like lab basement and it's just another actor with an eye patch on the phone with him, but he's always in profile and his hand, like the side of him you're seeing is the eye patch side.
Yeah.
And his hand and the phone are up blocking his face.
Yeah, and he's like in shadow. He's like behind like a screen.
He's on the other side of a bunch of lab equipment.
Yeah.
So it's impossible to know who it is. It's really inventive. And then it became a game of, well, we just watched the original. How is Steve going to factor into all these things that are happening? Like in the end of the movie, our hero, our like so-called hero, Ogata and Dr. Serizawa go to the ocean floor in scuba gear to set off the oxygen destroyer, which is going to skeletonize Godzilla under the water. And I was convinced that Raymond Burr was going to be one of the scuba suit guys.
Yeah, you were like, oh, he's going to go down with them. It's going to be him. I was like, I don't know. And then it was not.
It was not. I was disappointed.
Yeah.
But he's on the boat.
Yeah.
He's 100% on the boat.
100%. So I would not recommend watching this on its own, but like definitely watching it in concert with the original is fascinating to see what they did to the original movie.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
I completely agree. There's just stuff that popped up at me. And this is, so let's get to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing that I forgot to mention, and we did keep track of it as we were watching, is when does Godzilla actually show up in these movies?
Yeah, you were very excited to keep track of this.
So in the original, Godzilla shows up at 22 minutes.
Out of how many minutes?
It's like an hour and a half.
Okay.
Yeah. He shows up like coming up over a hill.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say shows up, I mean like you see his head.
Right.
That's a big thing.
Right.
Because like you see his feet and you see him in the waves.
Yeah, I think you see like his tail maybe.
Yeah, but when you see his face, that's when you see Godzilla. That's when Godzilla makes his first appearance as far as I'm concerned. So it's like 22 minutes in.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of mystery about what it is that's causing these boats to disappear. If it is for 15, 20 minutes and then you see Godzilla and then everybody knows and now it's like us versus Godzilla. But here's a couple things about the metaphor of this movie.
Yes.
And how it is removed.
Mm-hmm.
So the movie starts out with Raymond Burr giving like prologue.
Yeah.
He's giving narration. And he says this: nothing worse than Godzilla has ever happened to Japan.
Oh my God.
Cool.
Talk about revisionist history.
Right? Like, it's crazy how it's not in this.
No.
Like, at all.
Yeah, it's really weird.
It's a movie to make American people. It's just saying, hey, do you remember that whole thing like 10 years ago?
No.
Remember they did that thing and we were mad and then we went and did a little thing, like just don't think about that.
Yeah.
Monster, look at the big monster. Look at the big monster. Steve's fine though. Just so you know, Steve's fine. He's good. But he's just sitting and watching.
Yeah.
It's just Steve watching
Yeah.
the entire time. So they really take away any metaphor is removed.
Yeah.
It is now just an American dude in Japan watching a giant dinosaur, and there are some other Japanese people there that he's friendly with.
Yeah. I mean, the phrase that kept coming to my mind throughout all of these movies was the phrase generational trauma.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a serious phrase for these silly monster movies. But like, I just kept thinking about it. Like, how do people work out this trauma that they had. Just the way that individuals use art to face not only what they most fear, but like almost the survivor's guilt, I suppose. Like Steven Spielberg made Schindler's List, right?
Yeah.
Like that was his Godzilla. That was the thing that he kind of needed to face as the descendant of Holocaust survivors, which is something that I often, as also a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, I also think about. And I was reading a little bit about this, which is like there's some debate over whether having a great trauma, like something really serious, like being in the Hiroshima bombing, like actually affects the next generation, or whether it's nature versus nurture, essentially, for this trauma that's passed down through generations. And I think most people are on the side of sort of broken people make broken people. Like think about all of the people, my grandmother survived the Great Depression, and she never threw anything away, and she became a hoarder. And then so she taught my mom to be a hoarder. This I'm speaking metaphorically. This isn't actually a thing that happened to me, but you've heard people say things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just sort of that behavior, that sort of defensive behavior that you have because it's learned from someone that suffered something incredibly traumatic, like that no one should ever have to suffer. I really saw that in the, like, actually not even in the 1954 movie, because I feel like that's almost too close to the time to be representative of this like sort of generations of stuff that's happening, but definitely like in the later movies.
Well, especially Shin Godzilla.
In Shin Godzilla particularly, it was just something that I just kept thinking of over and over again. I'm no psychologist, but...
Right. Yeah, I feel like in this episode we're running up against a bunch of walls in terms of where our knowledge begins and ends.
That's fair. That's fine.
Now, I want to take a little trip through the years as we leave 1956 and run rapidly towards 1998.
Several decades
where
later.
we discuss our next Godzilla movie.
Oh, man.
But I want to talk about all the stuff that happened in between.
Okay. Yes, you did some research.
Now, so I did some research on this.
You did.
I also want to call out one of the things that I watched that was actually really fun and helpful was a video on YouTube called The History and Evolution of Godzilla by YouTuber Cynical Justin. I'll link to it in the show notes, but it's like an hour long, and he really walks through like every single Godzilla movie. And there are some clips in it that are just choice. Yeah. Very, very, very good. But I want to run through all of these. So I'm going to give the year, the name of the movie, and also the other monster that Godzilla fights.
Great. So this is, just to be clear, this is just a quick trip through movies that we did not watch.
Exactly.
Yes.
One other thing to keep in mind during these is the question of whether Godzilla is the antagonist or the protagonist. Because in the first one, he is the antagonist.
For sure.
He is the physical manifestation of generational trauma of nuclear holocaust.
Yes, that's correct.
Like, that leaves the franchise very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And like it leaves almost immediately, and then very soon after that he becomes the good guy.
Yeah.
So he's still the bad guy, but that's not part of it. And then he's just the good guy.
Because now he's like the mascot of Japan.
Right? So Toho Studios, Toho Productions is like, they own this. Toho is to Godzilla what the Broccolis are to James Bond.
Oh, good.
Just to be clear. So 1954, there was Godzilla. Then in 1955, there was Godzilla Raids Again, in which he fought a new monster called Anguirus, who was like a big ankylosaurus-looking dinosaur thing. Then in 1962, King Kong versus Godzilla, which was super cool because he was inspired by King Kong.
Yep.
Then Mothra versus Godzilla, which was kind of cool because there had already been a Mothra movie, so this was like serving as a sequel to that. Then, in 1964 as well, he fought Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, which is big. Have you ever seen Ghidorah before?
No. Yeah, yes, you just showed, that was what you just showed me a clip of, right?
Yeah, big wing. So one thing that's happening this year in year of our Lord 2019, a new movie called Godzilla King of the Monsters is coming out, but it's a sequel to the 2014 Godzilla,
right?
In which he's gonna fight Mothra and King Ghidorah and Rodan, and it's gonna be really cool. But I'm hoping it's good. Unlike the old Godzilla King of the Monsters. So in this one, he fights King Ghidorah and Rodan and Mothra. And Rodan is also a sequel to Rodan. This was like the one monster movie I grew up on.
Okay.
I never watched any of the original Godzilla movies when I was a kid, but my dad came home one day and he says, "Hey, I got this tape. It's a great movie. It's called Rodan. It's like a big pterodactyl that kills people."
Oh my God, I can see your dad saying that.
It's awesome. Rodan's so good. I'm like more than anything excited for this new one because Rodan's in it. I'm so stoked about it. It's going to be great. 1965, Invasion of Astro Monster. Villains, Rodan and King Ghidorah. Then, 1966, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep. And he fought Ebirah, which was, I believe, a giant lobster creature.
Great.
Yeah. And just to be clear,
and
by this point,
he's defending the city.
He's a good
point.
guy now.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. Then, son of Godzilla, and they introduced Minilla, who is Godzilla's kid.
Of course.
Who, like, was in so many movies after this.
Okay.
And he's often, like, people-sized.
Okay.
So while Godzilla's stomping around fighting monsters, like, there's one movie where there's, like, a clip of, like, a kid and his grandfather in a car, and Manilla's in the car with them.
God.
Then 1968 was Destroy All Monsters.
Uh-huh.
This was all of them. So they've all been taken to Monster Island, basically.
Of course they have.
And all the monsters are fighting. So it's King Ghidorah and Rodan and Mothra and Anguirus and Manila and Kumonga and Manda, Gorosaurus, Baragon and Varan.
It's a lot of
all
monsters.
versus Godzilla.
That's so many.
I think Godzilla wins.
Good job.
1969, All Monsters Attack, Gabara and Manila. 1971, Godzilla versus Hedorah. 1972, Godzilla versus Gigan. Then 1973, Godzilla versus Megalon. They held a contest to create a new character. I believe a fourth grader submitted theirs for a new character named Jet Jaguar.
Of course he did.
Big robot, super cool. Gigan, Rodan, and Anguirus. Then Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla in 1974. Then Terror of Mechagodzilla in 1975, and he fought the big robot Godzilla. Then, I'm going to run through these quickly. The Return of Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Biollante in 89, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah in 91, Godzilla vs. Mothra in 92, which ended up being the highest grossing. Godzilla vs. Mothra in 92 was basically the Star Trek Voyage Home, like the Voyage Home of this series.
Okay.
Where it's actually like one of the most popular ones of all time.
Okay.
And for years was the most attended, highest box office Godzilla movie ever.
Amazing.
Then there were a few more that I feel like are not super worth mentioning, because then by 95 it was Godzilla versus Destoroyah, and then it was kind of done.
Okay.
And then we get
that was a lot
to 1998.
That was so much.
Okay, so I'm really excited about this.
Okay. Did you do research on this?
Well,
Jeremy was assigned to do research on the history of Godzilla, and he got very enthusiastic about it.
Okay, so while in the early 90s,
yes,
while Toho was there was like a new resurgence of Godzilla. Which then declined rapidly. Like Godzilla versus Mothra was huge, and then the other ones were just kind of less and less and less as time went on. In the United States, there were also plans to make a new Godzilla movie. This property fell in the laps of a Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin.
Oh boy.
Writer, producer, director partners.
Extraordinaire.
Creators of Stargate and Independence Day.
So big explodey things.
Big explodey things. They have since broken up as a pair.
Oh no.
And Roland Emmerich, I feel like my favorite thing he's done was 2012.
I don't even know what that is.
It's very, very big and dumb.
Great.
And this fell in their laps. They signed on before Independence Day even came out. And then Independence Day came out, and like, holy shit, that's like the biggest movie ever.
So what you're saying is like this was from the makers of Independence Day.
Yeah.
Godzilla.
Yes.
Yes, that's how this must have been advertised.
Did you not remember the teaser for this?
No. First of all, I had never seen this.
Okay.
Second of all, I have never seen Independence Day. So this is not. Sorry.
I don't know how to process that. How?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've never seen it.
Okay.
You had never seen Sense and Sensibility.
No, the fact that you haven't seen Independence Day
which
explains...
I believe came out the same year.
I did see Independence Day.
I believe you.
I loved Independence Day. And then the teaser came out. So they actually, not only did this movie cost like $120 some odd million,
oh my God,
they actually like went out and shot a $600,000 teaser trailer.
No.
Yeah, it's super cool. No, it's great.
No.
I'm going to link to it. No, it's awesome.
That's
and it's basically like
too many monies.
It's a teacher taking his class to like a tour guide in a museum taking his class, and there's a statue of a T-Rex skeleton.
Yeah.
This, by the way, was like 4 years after Jurassic Park came out, and like the same summer that the Lost World Jurassic Park came out, and you've got a T-Rex skeleton, and he says it's the biggest predator that has ever lived, and then a gigantic foot comes through the ceiling and crushes the T-Rex.
Oh.
And then you just see Godzilla coming next summer, and it was like one of the best teasers I ever saw, because I was like 14 years old. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
I thought
It
you
was,
were going to say you were 6. I was like, you were not 6.
no, I was like 16. That was the next year. Like
Okay.
that was a
Fair
couple
enough,
years
fair
later.
enough.
I was 14. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And then there was like that whole tie-in with Taco Bell. You know, like, and the
I
Chihuahuas trying to
didn't-
capture Godzilla in a box.
I didn't grow up anywhere where there was taco. We didn't have Taco Bell.
Taco Bell spent $20 million on this ad
my
campaign
God.
as a tie-in with Godzilla.
Yeah.
This was big.
I feel like I've missed out on a cultural milestone which you have experience of.
Well, you're making the assumption that it didn't underperform at the box office.
I'm not making that assumption. I believe it did.
I would call it not the cultural milestone that you're referring to. But then this movie finally came out. I want to say lots of things about what they brought to it, but I feel like I can do that in a minute as we're talking about
Great.
it. But that's what brought us to it.
Okay.
What'd you think of this movie?
I mean, we try very hard on this show not to be judgmental
Yeah.
and not to say that the hard work and passion of artists is bad. This movie was very, very, very bad.
Yeah.
Very bad. It's a very bad movie. No human being in this movie acts in a way that any human being would act in any situation. And if you are to take this movie on face value and say, these people are behaving in this way while this thing is happening, these are the most callous, unfeeling, thoughtless, awful people you can imagine.
So I see we're getting right to tone.
Yeah, I'm jumping into tone.
Let's talk about tone.
Well, I want to talk about one thing before we jump into tone. Do you
Okay.
want to? So the problem with this episode, of course, is that we have to keep introducing the characters in the plot over and over and over again
Right.
because, of course, they're different in every single one.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll try to do this as quickly as possible. But I do want to say that the first scene of this movie is, I believe, an homage to the first scene of the original Godzilla, where we see the fishermen on the boat and they're just relaxing, doing their fisherman thing. It's nighttime, and then something comes out of the water and destroys the boat.
Yes.
So in this case, we see some guys on a boat doing their boaty thing. And like the first shot of the first human being, we see, this is what I wrote down. He's Japanese, you see, for he is watching sumo and eating noodles. It's like the most racist, stereotypical portrayal without language. Just like, here are some signifiers for Japanese. Look, Japanese.
Well, and I don't understand, because couldn't we have learned anything about them from their dialogue?
No, because they don't have any dialogue.
Oh, no dialogue, you
No,
say.
in no language. It's just like a lot of shouting.
Right?
You said they don't have dialogue, and I said, I thought they were like shouting in Japanese. And you were like, I think they were. I don't think they were. I think they were just shouting. Because, of course, like probably those actors are not, I would imagine, I don't know, but like they're probably not Japanese.
Well, the guy you're talking about, I feel really bad because he's a character actor. He's
Yeah.
an Asian American character actor.
Yeah.
But he is absolutely American.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Like-
saying. They don't necessarily speak Japanese.
Yeah.
They are just Asian American people, probably of all ethnicities.
Yes, exactly.
I would imagine,
I
based on the detail that this film did not care about.
I can imagine the casting call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, I just cannot imagine. It cannot be more. I feel really bad for people who have to make a choice between no visibility and noodle sumo guy on the boat.
If you just coined noodle sumo visibility.
Yeah, like pretty much.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Ugh.
I feel bad for people. Because every person with a spoken line in this movie is white.
Well, I think what you need to do in this moment, in order for us to progress with this conversation,
Yes.
is you need to take into your heart the same thing that the producers did.
What's
which
that?
is this. Let's get to the white characters.
Right. Okay. Yes. The important white characters.
Yes.
So we have Matthew Broderick, who is a scientist of some nature.
Matthew Broderick, star of Godzilla.
I'm just going to call him Dr. Ferris Bueller.
Okay.
We have Dr. Ferris Bueller's ex-girlfriend and her sexist boss, who's Mr. Burns.
hmm
Um,
Lots of Simpsons people
lots
in this.
of Simpsons people in this. I don't know why.
Well, it's in
all the Simpsons were in this.
And they all work at the same news station.
it's really
Because you got
weird.
Harry Shearer and Nancy Cartwright
And Hank Azaria.
Hank Azaria as one of the leads.
Yeah, Hank Azaria is a lead.
But sorry, I'm blowing up your spot.
It's totally fine. Her sexist boss, who we're going to come back to in a second, who's a piece of shit, and her best friend and her best friend's husband, who are just like the most New York stereotypes. Like literally, probably 90% of their dialogue is jokes about her hurting him physically.
Let's be clear. Italian
Yes.
New York stereotypes.
Italian New York stereotypes where she's very brazen and he is like, oh, but, my wife's gonna kill me, I better go. And she's like, I'm gonna kill him, but I love him. Like, this is and then we have Leon the professional as a Frenchman who has nothing but bad things to say about Americans and their coffee.
So many jokes about American coffee.
So many, like literally one would have been, if not enough, perhaps too much. There were like at least 10 jokes about American coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing about it, this may be too much detail about the American coffee joke, but the funny thing about it was like he would take a sip from like a giant mug of coffee, expecting it to be quote unquote French coffee, and then make a face that it tasted bad. The French don't drink coffee out of giant mugs. So there's no way that he would expect to be drinking French coffee out of a giant mug and then be disappointed. He would be disappointed in the first place. Anyway, I can guarantee you that that is true.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say you've left out their character names,
Okay.
which I think are only important in two ways, because Hank Azaria's name is Animal.
Great.
And I just always love this. So Matthew Broderick's name is Nick Tatopoulos.
Yes.
He's named after the production designer,
Yeah.
Patrick Tatopoulos, who designed the Godzilla that we see in this movie.
Yes.
I don't even think that's bad. I don't think it's good or bad.
Okay.
It's just weird, and I've never seen it before.
Well, especially because they make a really big deal out of his name because people keep pronouncing it wrong.
Yeah.
And he has to correct them.
Just a big inside joke with Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin and Patrick Tatopoulos, I guess.
Apparently.
I think that's delightful. I got no problem with that.
I don't
It's
know.
so weird.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Here's some greatest hits. And again, this is all about
Greatest hits.
tone.
Yeah,
This
tone.
movie is tonally terrible.
Terrible. Like maybe the worst I've ever seen.
People are dying constantly.
Dying.
And it is the goofiest movie I've ever seen.
Like so many like weird double takes and like sex jokes and like
It's like very nearly Godzilla slipping on a banana peel.
yeah, like almost.
It's very, very bad. Like, couple things. The mayor
Yes.
in it is Mayor Ebert.
Yeah.
And he's clearly based on Roger Ebert, and his assistant is Gene.
Yeah.
And like literally they put that in there, and he's of course a bumbling politician who has no idea what he's doing.
Yeah.
And they put them in there because Roger Ebert didn't like Stargate. That's what it comes down to.
Okay.
Guess what he thought of this movie?
Bad.
He didn't like it.
Because it was bad.
Do you remember how they introduced New York City?
How?
With the like title, because they go to a new place and there's
Yeah.
a little title card saying this is where you are.
Yeah.
Big words on screen. The city that never sleeps.
Oh God, yes, I do remember
Like,
that.
go fuck yourself.
Yeah. Well, here's a thing that I don't think you see anymore in movies, because I would like to think that we as a society have taken a more nuanced view of sexual harassment in the wake of #MeToo.
Yes.
I would hope.
I would hope so.
As I say that, I realize it's not true, but I would hope. So Matthew Broderick's ex-girlfriend, Audrey Timmons, she is the assistant to Harry Shearer, who is like the on-screen like news anchor, but she wants to be a news anchor and she wants a promotion out of being an assistant to be a news anchor, and he wants her to keep being his assistant because he wants to sleep with her.
Right. Because her career advancement is the most important thing in a Godzilla movie.
Right. He basically does the most disgusting thing, which is saying like, well, if you want that promotion, like you can come to my house tonight for dinner. And she's like, I don't want to do that. And he's like, well, if you want the promotion, I'm sure we both understand what I'm talking about here. Like, he's so blatant. And like, to her credit, she's like, no, I absolutely would not consider doing that. That is terrible. Which I guess for a second I was like, oh, well, good. Like, at least he's been exposed as a sleazebag. But like, then what I said to you was, this is making the assumption that this is what sexual harassment looks like. And sexual harassment almost never looks like something so blatant, especially in people's day-to-day. Like, I understand that there are all these stories going around of like people in Hollywood basically actually doing this thing. But like in your day-to-day life, it's very rarely going to look like someone saying so blatantly to you, you may have this promotion if you sleep with me. But it kind of devalues the everyday, just as serious sexual harassment and lack of advancement of women that happens all the time in much more subtle but still severe ways. And then, so this is treated as like, okay, he's a scumbag. We now have painted his character in very broad brushstrokes and we know he's a terrible person. So then Matthew Broderick, he's some kind of scientist. We meet him. He's in the rain, blah, 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 gets picked up by the military, taken to Panama because they want him for a thing. Like pretty much that's the information we're given. He is introduced to his new boss, who is an attractive red-haired woman, and like introduced to her in a way that we're sort of given to understand that like it's a little bit of a joke that his boss is an attractive woman. So like that's bad. And then she immediately turns to him and basically says, "Oh, hey there, gorgeous." And it's like, but now this is being played for laughs. This is actually still not okay. You're in a place of work. I was so the treatment of sexual harassment between women and men and women in this movie, because it never lets up, and it's played for comedy the whole time that she is his boss, and from the second she lays eyes on him, she's trying to get in his pants.
Mm-hmm.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And I hate it.
And I think you've hit on something that is, again, the big problem with the tone of this movie is every single thing is played for laughs.
Yeah.
Whether it's something that shouldn't be taken seriously or whether it's something that should be taken seriously,
Mm-hmm.
it's still going to get played for laughs.
And one other thing about the tone of this movie, or perhaps where this movie chooses to spend its time, you will notice I have been talking about this movie for probably 10 minutes and none of this has to do with Godzilla. Not one thing.
Nothing. Nothing at all.
What the fuck does this have to do with the shark?
Okay, let's talk about Godzilla.
Yes.
So I have a nomination for Sir not appearing in this film.
Go ahead.
And that's Godzilla in this movie.
Yeah.
Because this isn't Godzilla.
Yeah.
And not just because it doesn't look like Godzilla. And I think that's what a lot of people kind of focus on.
Mm-hmm.
There was like someone who's going around at the time who kind of coined Gino, basically.
Okay.
Just Godzilla in name only.
Okay.
Which I don't even care that much that it doesn't look like Godzilla. The problem is, and this is actually something Dean Devlin came out years later and said this was a mistake we made. We shouldn't have done this. They didn't want to make a Godzilla movie where the animal was actually a metaphor.
Okay.
They wanted to make it a Godzilla movie where the animal was an animal. I want to read a quote now from Roland Emmerich about kind of starting from scratch with this whole Godzilla thing.
Okay.
I didn't want to make the original Godzilla. I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to make my own. We took part of the original movie's basic storyline in that the creatures become created by radiation and it becomes a big challenge, which is inaccurate. I'm adding that. That's inaccurate.
Okay.
But that's all we took. Then we asked ourselves what we would do today with a monster movie and a story like that. We forgot everything about the original Godzilla right there.
Great.
Clearly
so.
They did. I guess it has something of environmentalism, like we're affecting the environment, but it's in a very kind of pop culture science-y way. And also it's gone half an hour into the movie.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, it doesn't really have anything to do with like what we're doing to the planet.
Yes.
It doesn't have anything to do with that.
They don't follow through.
That gets out of the way halfway through so we can know where it came from, but then it's just us versus the monster.
Right.
And the metaphor never comes back.
Right.
That's the big problem. And then Godzilla itself is basically not really good or evil for most of the movie. It's just an animal trying to survive.
Yes.
And that's how they kind of characterize it.
And then
it is super evil.
Then it suddenly hates Matthew Broderick for no reason.
And specifically, well, not for no reason. He killed all its babies.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then the whole third act is like Godzilla chasing them. It's bullshit.
Okay.
Anyway, they remove the central metaphor of the character.
Yes.
Godzilla is no longer about the thing that Godzilla was always about. And the question of whether Godzilla is an antagonist or a protagonist, yeah, Godzilla in this is strictly antagonist, but it's antagonism without the metaphor. So it doesn't really mean much. There's lots of monster movies. Godzilla's not like every monster movie. Godzilla's Godzilla. And this movie is just a monster movie.
Yeah.
So it misses the boat. It's not Godzilla. It is Sir not appearing in this film.
Yes. Well, that leads nicely into the female characters a little underwritten, because here's what I have to say.
Why would this lead into the female character? You're going to talk about Maria Patel a little bit more?
I'm sure not.
Really?
Nope. I'm going to talk about Godzilla a little more.
Oh.
There, just as a side note, there is a scene where they're like running through the back kitchens and back areas of Madison Square Garden and like slamming doors and locking them behind them, and then the like Oh, there's about 1 million little Godzillas. I just want to be clear, running around. And
so stupid.
And the little Godzillas are all like pounding at the door. And that's when I wrote down, I feel like I've seen this movie and it was called Jurassic Park.
Yeah, everybody felt that.
Yeah.
Like, even when I was a kid seeing this, I recognized that they're basically the Velociraptors from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
At the time, I liked that.
Yes.
At the time, I thought that was a feature, not
Yes.
a bug.
But I have a more serious quibble,
Okay.
which was a quibble I also had with Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
The monster is female. We know it because it laid a bunch of eggs. And they actually did test its DNA. Like, there's a plot point where they test its DNA and they say, this is a female monster. What pronoun do they use to describe this monster constantly throughout the movie, both in this and in Jurassic Park?
He.
Why do they call this monster he? I'm going to give you one guess.
Because it's big and powerful, and only big and powerful things can't be women. They got to be men.
That's correct.
Because of the patriarchy, maybe?
You have given me the correct answer.
Okay, good. I was worried I wasn't going to.
Did I get really intense for a second?
Yeah, you got a little scary.
I don't like it. It doesn't make sense. It's Lady Godzilla.
Yeah.
The T-Rex in Jurassic Park, they continually refer to as he, even though it's an enormous plot point that all the dinosaurs are female.
Yeah, they even call it out in the book.
Yeah.
They're like, we know they're all female, but we call them he because it's a T-Rex.
Yeah. Which is
In the movie, they don't even acknowledge it.
horrifically offensive.
Sorry, sweetie.
I'm so angry. The
I know.
female character is underwritten. Godzilla should be very offended.
I know.
They have misgendered Godzilla constantly throughout the movie.
I don't want to keep dunking on this movie. It's so bad.
Can I say before we move on, can I just say my favorite? I know you don't want to talk about it much more.
I only have like 2 or 3 more quick things to say, literally quick things.
I have one very quick thing, which is just my favorite quote from the whole movie. They're trying to find a way to get a message out of Madison Square Garden because everybody thinks Godzilla is dead and they want to transmit that they have found the nest. So they need to destroy Madison Square Garden because it's full of like dozens of eggs and baby dinosaurs. So someone has the bright idea, and this is the line, the network is on an internet.
Yep.
And that's how they're going to get the message out.
Because they're referring
They're talking to about a TV network,
Right.
not like just a vague network. But the network is on an internet. Is not a line that has ever made sense in any context.
No.
It's not a thing. That's never been a thing.
Yeah, it's a dumb movie.
Yeah.
It's a very dumb movie.
I did like the signs for Jostacola and Blockbuster in the background.
It's such a beautiful 90s time capsule.
Oh my God.
No,
okay,
like-
what were the other things you were going to say?
I loved it when it came out, but it is so weird that like it's a Godzilla movie, but it's about just a comedic little jaunt through destroyed New York
Yeah.
with Matthew Broderick and Hank Azaria
Yeah.
and Jean Reno.
Yeah.
Like it's super, super goofy the entire time. It's ripping off tons of other movies, like not paying homage, ripping off.
Yeah, yeah.
It's ripping off Jurassic Park
Yeah, for sure.
in a really, really bad way. It adds nothing to the Godzilla mythos. This was something that I loved. So Toho did not like it.
Yeah.
And because they basically got back the rights to this design for Godzilla.
Just so no one would ever use it again?
Then they did. In 2000, there was a movie called Godzilla Final Wars.
Oh, no.
Where Godzilla, man in suit Godzilla, fights every other monster he's ever fought, including Zilla. Zilla is a new creature that is this Godzilla.
Okay.
And he kills it immediately. Like it races at him and you can see the clip online, but like he races at it and he just destroys it.
Yeah.
So it was not loved by them. This was someone who directed a bunch of the Godzilla movies, made a really good observation about how like there's kind of a lack of internal logic in the movie.
Yeah.
Where
there's a lot of lack of internal logic in this movie.
no, but especially in terms of like how to hurt Godzilla.
Okay.
And this is, again, something that's kind of removing it from what Godzilla is. Because in the history of Godzilla movies, one thing that's true is when the army attacks Godzilla, it doesn't tend to go very well.
Yeah.
But in this one, because it's just an animal, like it's constantly dodging missiles. It's like really fast. And it isn't going to get hit by the missiles. It has to dodge the missiles.
Mm-hmm.
And this one director who directed, as I said, a bunch of Godzilla movies says, it's interesting that the US version of Godzilla runs around trying to escape missiles. Americans seem unable to accept a creature that cannot be put down by their arms. Like,
Fascinating.
I thought that was fascinating.
That is really interesting.
No, other than that, it's weird that I was looking forward to this movie for so long and expecting a big, great monster movie and disaster movie. And instead I got a movie where Matthew Broderick and Hank Azaria are literally evading velociraptors by breaking a gumball machine in Madison Square Garden,
Yeah.
and all of the Godzillas are rolling around on the floor like a goddamn cartoon.
That is the thing that happened in this movie.
Tone, terrible, all over the place, too funny, people are dying, and no one respects that. The metaphor, gone. It has like a little bit of a metaphor of radioactive stuff is ruining the environment, genetically modified, blah, 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 which is like not even really a thing the way we think it is. And there's bigger stuff we have to worry about. It's very simplistic, and it's gone halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack was something I 100% owned and listened to a lot because Come With Me by P. Diddy and Jimmy Page. It also had the Wallflowers covering Heroes, the David Bowie song. It was a great soundtrack. Then there was no Godzilla for a long time.
Right.
But a few other things happened in the world between 1998 and 2014 when the most recent American Godzilla movie came out.
Yes, may I talk about it?
Please.
I did this research.
Yes,
I was assigned to do this research.
Mm-hmm.
This movie was 1998, as you say. In between 1998 and the next movie that we're going to talk about, 2014, a very bad thing happened in Japan.
Yeah.
Once again, also having to do with nuclear power. 2011, there was a very bad earthquake, which caused a tsunami off the coast of Japan near a place called Tohoku.
Mm-hmm.
This earthquake was an undersea earthquake, so it wasn't like on the land. It was under the sea, like in the plates. And it was a 9 to 9.1 on the Richter scale, which is very bad earthquake.
It was like the worst earthquake in recorded history, right?
The worst that ever affected Japan.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I have a few numbers here. This is from the earthquake and the resulting tsunami. So just the natural disaster. Approximately 16,000 people died. About 6,000 people were injured. About 2,500 people missing. Mm-hmm. That's like to this day. We don't know what happened. This natural disaster had another very bad consequence, which is that it resulted in a nuclear disaster at a nuclear plant called Fukushima Daiichi. There's actually two. There were actually two different Fukushima Daiichi plants, Fukushima Daiichi 1 and 2. Each incident they sort of counted as there's a whole scale on which the powers that be rate nuclear disasters. So each one of the reactors failing, for reasons that I'll talk about in 1 second, were counted as a separate disaster, like on that scale. But everything all together was a 7 on the scale of nuclear disaster. The 7 is the worst you can do. There's only been 1 7 ever before, and that was Chernobyl. So basically what happened was after the earthquake, as was correct, all of the active reactors shut down. They had safeguards in place to have that happen. So that worked correctly. But the problem was the earthquake caused a tsunami, and the tsunami actually disabled the emergency generators that they needed to provide power to the cooling pumps. So even though the reactors were shut down, they were still, of course, incredibly hot, and they couldn't be cooled because they lost power and the backup generators lost power. So there were 3 separate nuclear meltdowns in 3 separate reactors. Some people at the plant were injured, and one person that we know of has subsequently died of cancer that is believed to be directly related to this incident, but it was like 10 years later. But the problem happened in the evacuation. Because what it sounds like is the evacuation, they had not really planned for it, especially in terms of how they were going to get people out who were elderly or disabled. And it sounds like that's where things really went awry. A lot of people died, not thousands of people, but a lot of people actually died as they were trying to evacuate. Like at one point, it looked like they were going to have to evacuate Tokyo. Like that was on the table. They didn't do that, but they might have had to. And so we're about to talk about 2 movies, one of which involves an incident at a nuclear power plant, and the other one of which involves a failed evacuation. Mm-hmm. Both of which I think had to have been directly related to this incident. Mm-hmm. That's all the information I have about the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster.
And I think it's important to go over all of that because, as you say, this really inspired the 2 Godzilla movies that would follow.
Yes.
So in 2014, we got Godzilla. Now, this was directed by Gareth Edwards. He had directed one other movie before this, and it was called Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a big low budget monster movie, like giant monster movie.
Yeah.
Super cool. A lot of people liked it, and they put him in charge of this gigantic movie. The story was something they worked on for a long time. The original draft of the script was written by David Callahan, and then the screenplay credit goes to a guy named Max Borenstein. But this was one of those movies where like lots of people worked on it.
Sure.
I want to call out one in particular who was kind of internally known to have the final rewrite of it, which was Frank Darabont.
Oh, great.
Who has done many good things.
Many things.
He came up during our Frankenstein episode. And hearing him talk about what he was trying to bring to Godzilla was so similar to him talking about what he was trying to bring to Frankenstein.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're interested, definitely go listen to our Frankenstein episode because it was really interesting.
He has a thing of, well, no, I want to get back to what people love about the character. He basically taking the opposite. He and Gareth Edwards especially were taking the opposite tack of what Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin were doing.
Shocker.
They're like, oh, people like Godzilla because he's Godzilla. How about we do a Godzilla movie?
Yeah.
That might be crazy.
Yeah.
So Gareth Edwards was all about doing something that was big and authentic and scary and also very, very much related to the fear of nuclear trauma.
Yes.
Like national trauma.
Yeah.
And that was actually Ken Watanabe's in it. He was not going to be in it. And then he talked to Gareth Edwards and he basically went to him and said, this needs to be part of it. If this isn't part of it, I'm not in it. And Gareth Edwards says, oh no, it's part of it.
Yeah.
So he joined that.
Yeah.
And Frank Darabont, something that he brought to the movie that is maybe the thing I respond to the most about it is that I think he did a lot to solidify the central metaphor, which is different than the original metaphor of Godzilla.
Oh, for sure.
But it is a very concrete metaphor.
Yeah.
Which is basically humanity versus nature.
Yes, that is the sort of through line from Ken Watanabe's character, which is what he keeps saying. Like, this is, you can't fight this. This is nature. Let nature sort itself out.
One thing about this that is interesting is that this movie doesn't even really start with Godzilla being an antagonist.
Yeah.
Godzilla's the protagonist. Godzilla is protecting us from the Mutos, which are the other monsters in this movie.
Yes, we find out.
Right? He's kind of an anti-hero because even him as a hero, like, lots of people die.
He destroys a lot of buildings.
Right? But he is the one who's killing the bad monster that's killing even more people.
Yeah.
So we have a very kind of complicated relationship with him.
Yeah. So we start in the past, in the sort of 10 years ago-ish past, with our hero, Bryan Cranston, and his wife, Juliette Binoche, who are both living in Japan. They both work at the nuclear power plant, and they have a young son. And it's Bryan Cranston's birthday, and he has the worst birthday that anyone could possibly have.
Real bad birthday.
He has a very bad birthday, which is that he's an engineer. He's trying to warn some people at the plant that something is not looking right. There's sort of tremblings in the Earth's core that aren't looking good. No one wants to listen to him. He sends his wife, who's also some kind of nuclear scientist, down with a team to look at the reactor core, and while they're down there, it explodes. And he basically has to shut the door on them himself because they can't get out in time, and he has to close the door so the whole thing doesn't explode. Yeah. So he basically watches his wife die in front of his eyes on his birthday.
Yep.
That is a bad thing that happens at the very beginning of this film. And I said to you while we were watching this, like it's horrifying. It's awful. And
this is a horror movie.
And I said to you, I'm not, like, this is so bad that I refuse to even let this affect me. Like, I refuse. I will not let this happen because I can see what they're doing and I'm not going to give into it. So then it's now years later. His son is in the military. He has a wife. He has a kid. They're living in San Francisco. And we learned that basically Bryan Cranston has spent the last however many years, like I think I said 10 years. It's like 20. It's 15 years. As like a conspiracy theory crank trying to get back to the abandoned nuclear power site because he thinks he has a theory as to what's going on and no one will believe him. And everyone thinks he's just like lost his mind because of the way his wife died. His son goes to spring him out of jail because he's been arrested for trespassing. And then he convinces him to go down with him. And then we see a monster.
Right.
That's what happens.
I'm like telling you to speed up because The thing I like about this movie is the human plot doesn't affect anything.
Yeah, like nothing that any of the humans do ultimately affects anything. Like they could have done nothing and it would have happened the same.
I would say I really wanted it to be that.
Yeah.
I remember when this movie came out, there were a lot of criticisms that I heard of it that the people were a little too inactive. And they didn't really do they didn't do enough to affect the story, and that was a criticism. That's the thing I like about it.
Yeah.
I like the fact that it's humanity versus nature, and at the end of the day, the things that are happening are a result of actions we have taken. Like these two creatures that are trying to kill us all that Godzilla has to like come out of hibernation to stop, they're here because of us toying with nuclear power and nuclear bombs. But now that they're here, there's really nothing we can do to stop them.
Right.
This is what we have wrought. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's like one thing later in the movie that basically one of the Mutos, which is what these creatures are called, lays a bunch of eggs and they're going to hatch. And Ford, our main character, Aaron Taylor Johnson, like he burns all of the babies before they can hatch.
Yeah.
We don't know necessarily that this actually is saving the world from new babies. Godzilla might have been able to handle them fine.
We don't know.
But it's like the most active that anybody is in it. But there's a big thing near the end of the movie where there is a nuclear bomb that they are trying to get out to sea to kind of lure these creatures towards it and Godzilla and blow them all up at the same time. And he's trying to disable the bomb. He is on the boat, can't disable the bomb. Godzilla kills the creatures itself.
Yeah.
And he's airlifted off the boat before the bomb explodes.
Yes.
Like, he's useless.
Yeah.
He is not helping anything. He's just watching all of this happen, and all of these actions that the military have taken are doing nothing.
I mean, he basically spends the whole movie just kind of hitching rides with people trying to get home.
Like, you know who he is? You mentioned at the beginning that there were, like, people who were at both Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
I feel like the way they picked the main character for this movie is to kind of work back in their heads and say, okay, what are all the events that we want to have happen in this movie? Okay, well, it's going to start in Japan. Then there's going to be a big thing in Hawaii. Then there's going to be a big throwdown in San Francisco. We want to have someone who's at all three. Let's invent all of these survivors in our head and come up with the one person who happened to be at all of these occurrences.
Yes.
He's our main character.
Yeah.
Like he's not the main character because his character determines that he's the main character. He's the main character because he's someone who was there for the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, his job is that he's a bomb expert in the military, so that's how he keeps getting kind of moved around, because people keep going like, oh, all our bomb experts were killed, I guess you're still alive, yeah, sure, you can come with us and try to explode this thing.
Yeah,
that's the plot, but it's kind of second. He doesn't really do anything with his bomb knowledge, as you say, ever.
Right, but the thing I like about it is he's very active. He does a lot of things. The things he does don't always have consequences. So you could compare him to Raymond Burr in Godzilla King of the Monsters. The difference is his inaction is directly related to the central metaphor of the movie.
Yeah.
Whereas Raymond Burr's inaction is just because they couldn't have him interacting with anybody because they didn't have those people.
Right.
So I think the metaphor of this movie is super, super strong. And there's just, okay, throughout, at the very beginning when the initial like earthquake and attack hits the nuclear power plant, and Bryan Cranston, when Juliette Binoche is running through the tunnels to get back to the door, there isn't anything Bryan Cranston could have done to save her.
No, nothing.
It's not like she was running and she almost got to the door and he had to close the door on her. He had to close the door and she was nowhere near it.
Yeah.
Like, he had to do it. There is no way she could have made it through.
Yes.
Later, 15 years later. So another big criticism of this movie is that Bryan Cranston beefs it. Like
he beefs it very early in the movie.
Like, he beefs it before we even see Godzilla. I mentioned that I went through to keep track of when Godzilla appears. I forgot to mention in 1998, he appears, you kind of see him 26 minutes in, but he doesn't really make his full reveal until 46 minutes into the movie.
Okay.
This Godzilla is even crazier than that. You don't even see Godzilla's face until an hour into this 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
Sidebar, I love it. I've heard so many complaints about this movie where there isn't enough like monster action in it. And that's by design. I was so here for this movie when it came out. It denies you monster action throughout the entire movie.
Yes.
You don't get an actual monster fight until well into the third act.
Yeah.
And then it's amazing
It's
and
just,
huge
it's
and
a lot.
big and loud. And the
Very
dog
loud.
hid behind the
The
couch.
this was when the dog hid behind the
He was
couch.
so sad.
He was so sad.
But there is a scene where Bryan Cranston falls. He's on this like catwalk and he's trying to save his now grown son. And there's a monster attacking, the one that isn't Godzilla. And he like falls off the thing and falls on the ground. And then later he dies. Like he's trying to get to his son who's trapped, doesn't get to him, and his son is fine anyway.
Yes.
None of the actions he's taking actually do anything. Then Ford has to just like watch his dad fall off this catwalk. He can't get to him. There's nothing he can do about it.
Right.
And he survives, but then dies later, like in the helicopter and then
Yeah.
on the military boat. And Ford cannot save his dad.
Yeah.
There's nothing he can do. And I feel like you can look at this movie through that lens, and almost anytime a character is in a chance where they can take action, oftentimes their action means nothing.
Yeah.
And you could make a 10-minute version of this movie where a monster attacks a nuclear power plant in Japan. Then 15 years later, there's another big fight in Hawaii. Then there's a big fight in San Francisco. And that's it.
Yeah.
And you don't need the human characters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think about like the human characters that we're supposed to care about, as you say, like in many cases. So, I mean, here's another example. Our hero Ford's wife, Elizabeth Olsen, and their like 5-year-old son.
Yeah.
So she's a nurse and she's at work at the hospital and she's got her son with her. And her coworker says, "Do you want me to take your son with me on the bus to the safe area?" And at first she says no. And then she runs out with him and she says yes. But in the end, like, she was fine. We don't actually see anything that she went through. And the kid was in danger, but then fine. So like her decision to have him stay with her or go with her coworker, he actually probably would have been fine in either case.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
But that's basically it. Like the metaphor of this movie is we caused this and nothing we can do is going to fix it.
Yes.
Which is, I'm hoping, like if we're comparing this to like what we're doing as far as the climate goes,
Yeah.
that's very fatalistic.
Yeah.
But just because it's fatalistic and hopefully not true doesn't mean it's not a really good metaphor for a movie.
Yeah, and I mean that there is one character, like I said before, who does keep saying exactly what you just said over and over again, which is we caused it, let it work itself out, which is the scientist Ken Watanabe.
Whose name is Dr. Serizawa.
Whose name is Dr. Serizawa, right? Which is from the original, which is the guy with the eye patch. I mean, the only thing that I didn't love about sort of the optics of this was that he's sort of, despite being like a scientist and like everybody is really deferring to him, except they're not listening to him, but like they're treating him with great respect, like for his knowledge. Like it's what he's actually saying is almost this sort of quote, like mystic oriental trope. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just saying, let them fight. Like he just keeps saying the same thing.
I think but I think it's born out of the fact that everyone else is trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And he knows that we're just wasting our time.
Yeah.
Like if we're going to survive it, it's because these monsters are going to fight and the one we want to win is going to win.
Yeah. No, I know, but I'm just saying having him say it in the way that he says it, I think plays into some bad stereotypes, whether or not that was intentional.
I'm not going to disagree with that. I don't necessarily view it that way.
That's fair.
But I don't think you're wrong for calling that out.
Yeah, I don't think it doesn't ruin the movie. And clearly, as you say, like Ken Watanabe agreed to do it and had been trepidatious about it. So like clearly he was fine with it. It was just something I noticed.
So we talked about the metaphor. Tonally, though.
Yes.
Would you say this movie has a consistent tone?
I would say so, absolutely. Like it's again, it's like what you said about the original. It is very serious with some levity as appropriate. Like there are some moments where the situation is somewhat humorous. For example, when they're in the police station, and Ford is picking up his dad, there's this like Japanese couple picking up their teenage son who's like a goth and like yelling at him, and it's very, very, very funny. So like moments like that where the levity has nothing to do with like the seriousness of what's happening with Godzilla, I think are perfectly appropriate. But like in terms of like, wow, this has wreaked destruction that will take many, many years to recover from, I think the tone is appropriately serious.
Yeah, I think it embraces, there's a particular type of laughter that I think happens a lot in it, which is that kind of laughing that you do when you just have a lot of tension and it has to be released somehow. Like it happens a lot because, as I was saying before, he constantly interrupts the action, because he's saving the action for the end.
Yeah.
Godzilla and one of the monsters will go at it, and right before they're about to go at it, a door closes that you're on the other side of,
Yeah.
and you don't see it. And like, I can't help but laugh right there because it's just so funny that they would make that decision.
Right.
But it's just because there's so much tension and it has to let itself out some way.
Right. Totally.
I think they embraced that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summation of the tone of this movie.
I think it's ultimately very successful.
Yeah, so we talked about the metaphor, we
enjoyed it.
talked about the tone. I think it all works together in a pretty solid way.
Now, at the same time that this movie was being developed, Toho was making another Godzilla, and it was released 2 years later in Japan. It is available here now, and it is called Shin Godzilla.
My number one comment about this movie is I have never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything stylistically like this movie. How would you describe it? I almost don't know how to describe it.
I can't.
Yeah.
It is relentless.
Yeah.
Its pace is insane.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that there's a movie we watched that had 300 speaking roles.
Yes.
That's this movie.
Yes. It's 2 hours and you would not believe, it's exhausting.
Yeah. One thing that I don't think would surprise you, so the writers and directors, Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, came from the world of animation, which I don't think would be that much of a surprise.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, it's hard to describe.
Let me ask you this way.
Yes.
Maybe this is how we can talk about it. In what ways does this Godzilla, does this story defy expectations of a normal movie like this?
So usually stories about Godzilla are about heroes trying to figure out how to fight it and how to destroy it.
Right.
This movie is about bureaucracy.
Purely.
Yes.
There are those people that you're talking about.
Yes.
But that's not central to it the way it is in other versions.
Not at all. And if they act in ways that are successful, it is despite the intense bureaucracy that we see throughout this movie.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah.
And here's how it starts.
Yes.
It doesn't start with character introductions.
Right.
It starts with bureaucracy introductions. Right. Because as the movie is beginning, a disaster is happening in the water off the coast of the city.
Yeah.
That's just how it starts. There's no music, there's no intro, there's no prologue. Suddenly, the water is boiling, and you're seeing the meetings happening of the city council members and the government talking about what's going on.
Yeah.
And you've just got a whole bunch of people who are saying, what could this be? It could be this, could be this. You got one guy who says, well, there's reports that it's a creature. And they're all going, no, it's not a creature. Turns out
it's a creature.
It is a creature. And then we see that it's a creature, and the creature comes on land. Now they're dealing with it being on land. Now it's destroying the city, and they're talking about it destroying the city. They've taken no action.
Yeah.
It's just
like we have to have a committee meeting to form a subcommittee to figure out whose jurisdiction this comes under so that that person can have a meeting to figure out what they want to do. That's literally what this movie's about.
And that's the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
The number of characters you meet in that 10 minutes and the number of cuts is insane.
Yeah, there's
every character is introduced with their title on the screen.
Yeah, thank goodness, because otherwise it would be a mess. So basically, we're watching this, of course, with there's two different versions. There's a dubbed version and a subtitled version.
Make sure you watch the subtitled version.
Yeah, make sure you watch the subtitled version.
The dubbing, I watched a little bit of it. It's very bad.
We almost watched the dubbed version by accident. At any given time, if you are an English speaker watching the subtitled version, you may need to be reading 3 different things at one time, the person's title, the person's name, and what they're saying. And what they're saying goes so fast. I am a very fast reader, and I had difficulty reading everything that came up on the screen. That is not a problem I usually have. Usually I'm with subtitled movies, I find it frustrating because I'm so far ahead because I've already read the subtitles 5 minutes before they're finished speaking. This was not a problem with this film.
Mm-hmm.
There is humor and levity, and a lot of it comes from the way that they set up shots. It's very Wes Anderson almost.
It's like if Robert Altman and Wes Anderson directed a Godzilla movie.
Yes, it's a very absurd Robert Altman movie.
I want to just kind of bring something up really quickly.
Yeah.
We've already been describing it for a while. Did you enjoy this movie?
I enjoyed the first hour. Then I got really tired. Why?
I loved it.
Yeah, I know you did.
I loved it so much.
I thought it was masterful. I just got tired watching it.
I know I feel like in this episode more than other ones I've talked about other people talking about the things we're talking about
Yeah.
and other reviews. This is one, and I can't explain that. I just think that Godzilla movies tend to
I think it's
be
just
polarizing.
Yeah, it's just there's a lot of commentary about it because it's freaking Godzilla.
Yeah, they're big monster movies, and people take their big monster movies very, very seriously.
For some reason.
I mentioned at the very beginning there was like some YouTuber that I found, not the one who made the like really good hour-long look at all the Godzilla movies, but some other guy. I'm not even going to link to him. I'm not going to mention him because I don't want to give him any traffic.
Yeah.
But just this real jackass of a YouTuber who just makes videos like, you know, why this movie sucks, which
it's rude.
It's just rude. Like, we talk about things that aren't good, but we at least try to find good things in them. I don't know. He hated this movie, and I watched a little bit of it, and it's so funny to me that he's not the only person I've heard, but I've read other criticism of it that talk about the fact that it has 300 speaking roles, and the fact that you never really... There's like one character or two characters you get to spend more than 5 minutes total with.
Once again, our hero, the handsomest and tallest man on screen.
Yeah. You get to spend a couple of minutes, you get to spend some time with him, but most characters you don't. And they talk about how this is a movie you can never connect to because there's too many characters and they're all stereotypes and they're all cardboard cutouts. And that is this movie's big flaw.
That's the point.
Like,
that was literally the point.
I know I said this before, but that's a feature, not a bug.
Yes.
If what you want is a movie, if what you want is a Godzilla movie that has 4 or 5 main characters and the entire movie hinges on their emotional journey through this, go watch the 2014 Godzilla.
Yeah.
Or the original.
That would also be fine.
You have that.
Don't watch the 1998 one, though, because it's very bad.
Yeah, but if you want to watch a incredibly smart satire about how nations respond to natural disasters, this is one of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah, it reminded me of I don't think you've seen it, but the In the Thick of It.
Yeah, which I haven't seen.
Yeah, just like very like inside baseball politics type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the thing that it's just like in any given shot, it's just this sea of faces, mostly dudes, like sitting around trying to make decisions.
And that's the point.
Like,
that's what they're drawing attention to. There's this great, so here are like, I decided these are the 5 main characters.
Yeah.
Okay. There is Rando Yaguchi. He is the Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary.
Yes.
All of the characters have their title.
Yeah.
Next to them.
Yes.
It's amazing. He's our hero. There's Hideki Akasaka. He's the aide to the prime minister. He's like
kind of with the glasses.
Yeah. He's glasses guy. Then there's Hiromi Ogashira. She's the deputy director of the Nature Conservation Bureau.
Yeah.
She's great.
She's great.
Like, there was a moment where I stopped the movie and I turned to you and I say, okay, I don't expect this to happen, but given the movies we normally would see, how do we expect this to go? Because our main character, you know, they're all saying like, it's a creature. We don't know if it's a creature. Oh, now we know it's a creature. How can we get someone? And he says, I know someone who can come in. I know someone. I know her. She's good. And she can tell us more about this.
Yeah.
And then we're introduced to her. And it's this great scene where she's telling off all the old dudes at the table who have no idea what they're talking about how animals work. And she's telling them how they really work. And how, like, they say, well, it can't possibly go on land because its feet can't support it. And she goes, its feet are already supporting it. You're wrong. And I feel like in any other movie, they would be the leads.
Yeah.
They would be the leads. We have now been introduced to our second main character.
Yeah.
And she's going to be quirky and cool and straight to the point and really engaging. She's in the rest of the movie, but she's no more major than 99% of the cast.
Right.
Like, would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
And we talked about what we thought was going to happen, and then we kept watching, and this movie just keeps defying expectations.
Yeah.
That's what I found when I was watching it. Mm-hmm.
So you had like a couple more characters you want to talk about?
There's Ren Osugi as the prime minister.
Yeah.
He's... I actually don't want to spoil stuff about this because I imagine a lot of people haven't seen this.
Yes, this is too close to spoil.
He's great in the movie.
Yeah.
He's one of the best parts of the movie. His reactions, this movie is built on reaction shots.
So many breaking the fourth wall, like shots straight into the camera.
But not breaking the fourth wall in that the characters are acknowledging that they're in a movie.
No.
But you do have a lot of characters staring into camera, but the camera is another character.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There is, I think the scene you're talking about is like everyone's asking the prime minister to make a decision.
And you're basically him.
And everyone's looking at you, looking for what you're going to do.
That was what I was thinking
There's
of.
so much pressure there.
Yeah.
And then we have Satomi Ishihara as Kyoka Ann Patterson.
Yeah. So this was what took me out of it a little bit.
She's a special envoy to the President of the United States.
So she is an American character.
Yes.
Being played by a Japanese actress.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether the I could not possibly say whether the actress herself speaks English or whether she memorized her lines phonetically. If she speaks English, it is with an accent, which is fine because I certainly don't speak more than one language. But it kind of takes you out of it when someone who is supposed to be third generation American-born American, her dad is a senator, and her mother or her grandmother, we learn, was from Japan. It just takes you out of it a little bit. It's okay because we're not the intended audience of this movie.
And that's exactly it.
Like that's fine. And it just made me think about like, what if it was an American movie with an American actor playing a Japanese character speaking Japanese with an American accent? Someone would probably say exactly the same thing. And I'm sure that's happened. We just don't know what Japanese in an American accent sounds like.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Like think of yourself as a casting director. You're looking for someone who can play the part, that can communicate with everybody on set.
Yeah.
And they tell you, oh, I can speak Japanese. You're not going to necessarily go through the due diligence of making sure their accent is perfect.
Yeah, certainly not. I mean, I don't think it would have taken me out of it quite so much had I actually... This was the one plot that I really couldn't follow. Like her story, or what was going on, I had a really hard time following.
Well,
that.
I mean, you called out before, like the second hour I don't think you're right. It doesn't play as well as the first hour.
Yeah.
Like I was super, super engaged. And by the end of it, it definitely is a bit of a slog because they're really getting into international politics.
Yeah.
I think this movie works the best when it's working at the like local and national political level. Once they start getting into international politics,
that was where it got really confusing.
Because I feel like whenever they're talking at the local and national level, they're talking about people you then meet.
Yes.
And that's constantly happening. But as soon as they start getting international, you never really meet the people they're talking about.
Yeah.
You're talking about characters you never see or rarely see, and it just becomes less engaging at that point.
Yeah, I agree.
And harder to follow.
Yeah, agree.
But she's to your point, like this, we're not the audience for this movie.
Yeah, totally not.
And so for her, I just kind of had to turn that part of my brain off and say, I am a guest in their house.
Yeah.
I am watching the very nice movie they made for themselves.
Yes.
I'm very happy that I am able to watch this. I'm not going to quibble over her accent.
As I said,
even though it is worth mentioning.
It is worth mentioning, but as I said, I don't think I would have found it as distracting had I been able to follow the plot. But I couldn't follow her plot very well, and therefore that was the thing that my brain chose to focus on.
Totally. So let's look at our two things.
Okay.
So in terms of the metaphor,
like the failed it's not even the Fukushima disaster, it's the bureaucracy around the decision making with the evacuation, the failed evacuation. I'm sure that's what it's directly referencing.
Totally.
Yeah.
And also, if Godzilla is a vessel for metaphor, this Godzilla, like I went into it thinking, oh, this is another Godzilla versus another monster movie. Godzilla's going to save us. Because when you first meet the creature, it doesn't look like Godzilla.
No, it looks awful.
Yeah, it's real unsettling. It's not good.
It's not good.
And then it turns into Godzilla over the course of the movie. And like very quickly you realize, oh, no, one monster, it's just Godzilla.
Yeah.
Godzilla's very bad. Like Godzilla is the most antagonistic of antagonists that he's ever been.
Yeah.
So it really is those two things. It's the kind of inevitability of nature coming after us, and it's characterizing our inability to deal with it, specifically by our bureaucracy.
Yeah.
It's so clear.
Yeah.
And then there's tone.
Yeah.
Tonally,
it's consistent.
Super consistent. Anything like the tone of the original?
Nothing.
Or 2014?
No, although they do use the music. I won't say what happens because as we said, this is the one we're not going to spoil what actually happens. But they used the music probably for the last 20 minutes of the final encounter from the final encounter with Godzilla in the 1954 one. And like, I recognized it, but I didn't recognize what I knew it from. So I heard this music all of a sudden and I turned to you and I was like, what is that? And you were like, it's the original Godzilla music. It's amazing.
It was so good. Just in terms of the tone, I love the fact that it's the funniest one we watched.
Oh yeah.
by
funny
far.
funny on purpose and consistently.
But it's amazing how its tone is so different from 98.
Yeah.
Because 98, I think is basically, it's a comedy by people who are making a comedy because they have no faith in the material.
Yeah.
They have no faith in actually engaging you on a horror level with the material. They know it's never going to be scary, so let's distract you by our goofy characters.
Yeah, with jokes and physical comedy.
Yeah.
This was funny because it was satirical. It was deeply satirical.
Yeah.
And ironic. And that was where the humor lay. And it was also, as I've said now like 6 times, it's also consistent all the way through. There wasn't this weird joke about little Godzilla slipping on gumballs from nowhere.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm. I loved it.
Yeah.
This
it was very, I would recommend, here's my recommendation. If you're going to watch this, watch at least one of the other ones first so you have something to compare it to.
I think it is so good to watch along with the 2014 version. Like,
I might watch it along with the original version. I think that would be really cool.
But that's what I was going to say. Like,
Yeah.
I think if there's anyone listening who has never seen any of these, like, definitely, let's take a step back now and let's look at all of them. The original one.
Yeah.
Worth watching.
Absolutely. Not the American version of it, but the original.
I feel like that's a separate little double feature.
Sorry.
Yeah, do that as a little double feature. Watch the original and then King of the Monsters. Like, that is very, very funny. Like, there are movies that I think of, like Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid and Kung Pao Enter the Fist, which, how much of that did you get through before we had to turn it off?
Like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I love that movie.
I know you do.
And I know you don't, and that is okay.
That's fine.
It's okay with me, and I'm very sorry I made you watch it.
It's okay.
But it's one of those things where they're taking another movie and just reusing shots from it and putting their own actors into it. And it's so inventive and so much fun, but ultimately incredibly disrespectful to the original, and I don't think should be watched as a Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
But as a piece of film history, it's really fun.
Yeah.
So definitely watch the original. Godzilla King of the Monsters, let's start doing our quadrants. Okay. Do you think the people who quote unquote made, even though they spent they had to work hard on it.
Yeah.
Do you think the people who made Godzilla King of the Monsters loved the source material?
Yeah. Did they love it, or did they
Godzilla?
Or did they care about? Like, because we usually say,
I guess, did they care about it?
Usually the question is, did they care about it?
I was gonna say no to both.
You don't think so?
I don't think they gave a shit about the original.
But why did they make it then? You think they just thought they could make money off of it?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the American producers got it and said, this will make us some money. Who can we hire to do it?
All right,
go do this.
That's fair.
I think they ended up making something fun and inventive in spite of that.
Yeah.
But I don't think they care about the original.
Right, that's fair.
Is it successful?
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not as far into that corner as maybe another movie we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
But
I think it's fun and successful. I could see people saying it's fun and successful if they had never seen the original.
Sure.
Because it does have Godzilla, and there is ultimately something really compelling about that creature.
Yeah, but that's not, the people that made this movie didn't make that.
No.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. Like, ultimately, the things that are successful about it, they stole whole cloth from another creator.
Right.
So
but
that's not okay to endorse.
as a whole, especially when you compare it to the original, it is not a successful movie.
Yeah.
1998. We know for a fact they didn't care about the original.
Yes.
We know from their own mouths that they didn't care about the original. And despite the fact that 15-year-old me fucking loved it in the theater,
Is not successful.
even a little.
Even a little, way down in the corner.
Oh, it's just a turd.
It's like the farthest down.
Blah. I could say so much more about it. 2014.
Do you think they cared about the source material?
Absolutely.
I agree.
Like, these are people who love Godzilla and love monster movies and want to do something really good.
Yeah.
And we can quibble over whether they did. I believe that it is successful.
Yeah. Upper left.
Then we have 2016. Did they care about the source material?
Of course they did.
Of course they did. It's the same
people.
production company.
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe
they
not
care.
the exact same humans, but yeah.
Was it successful?
100%. Yeah. Weirdest movie I've ever seen.
The most pleasant surprise of this entire episode was Shin Godzilla. It is such a delight.
Yeah.
I loved it. Well, this has been Adapt or Perish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AdaptCast. And if you tweet about the show, don't forget to use the AdaptCast hashtag. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads, and you can also find and follow me on Letterboxd. If you have anything to say that's longer than a tweet, you can always send an email to adapterperishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are 2 great ways you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice helps so much with our visibility and would be greatly appreciated.
Because, as you know, the network is on an internet.
Yeah, yep. Just dunking on movies from the 90s and their technology.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.